Welcome to another brilliantly bona fide bonus video. Say that 5 times fast. And in this one, we are going to be diving a little bit deeper into the old MoGraph module and talk about how we can start doing different things with it, like animating text and animating other objects using things like effectors and fields. So let's go ahead, and I got this little Pug Dash scene. All it needs is an awesome looking 3D title made out of 3D text. So how about we make this scene a little bit more motastic? That's the ticket, with some text. So here we are in a whole new scene. Remember, I like to compartmentalize, so I got this whole new scene. I got a couple textures here that I'm going to use. Let's just say they're the brand colors of this new game called Pug Dash. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create some 3D text, animate it, throw it back into this main Pug Dash scene, and, make millions of dollars with this Pug Dash game, right? That's how this works. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some 3D text. And remember, how we can do that is going into this text menu and grabbing some text. So not the text spline, that will just be the spline version of the text, but the MoText here. And so if we click on the text option, go to the object tab if you're not there already. What we're going to do is first we're going to align this to the middle of our axis center here. So now everything's nice and aligned. And of course we can adjust the depth here. We can change the text here as well. So what I'm going to do is, the name of our game is Pug Dash. So I'm going to hit Pug and Dash in there and have them on two different levels of lines of text there. You can see there is our updated text. This font looks kind of garbagey. Sorry, Sigoi UI, you're kind of garbagey. So what I ended up doing was, Creative Cloud has a lot of great fonts. And if you have a Creative Cloud subscription, I went and found the HWT Gothic Round, which if we search for it, and it's great because you could actually search for things. See this little font filter? If I type HWT, there is a very nice plumpy, thick Gothic Round font right there that I thought was really kind of fit the whole vibe of, if this were an actual game, this would be very, kind of fun and kiddish and round type and stuff like that. And so now we got a much more cool looking type that I think will work for this game. And you can see that our leading, which is basically the space between the lines of type, is way off. So we can adjust those types of things with the horizontal spacing here. Remember, this is your kerning. If you're into fonts and you're a real designer, you know these terms. If you're a fake designer like me, it might be a little bit hard, but this is going to be your vertical spacing or leading. So basically, we can just align things here. And if we want to get even more nitty gritty in here, you really want to be a designer and wear your little designer badge, official designer badge, what you're going to want to do is go in and, of course, kern your type. And in Cinema 4D, this is like extremely easy to do. I think it's maybe one of the most easy visual ways to be able to kern type in any app I've ever used. And how you can activate that is this kerning option here. So if I check on Show 3D GUI, you can see all of these little icons kind of showed up, all these little helpers in our viewport. And basically what you can do is just select one of these letters and you can start kerning the type. So very easy. You're just going to select this little box with the letter in it and you can adjust things and start kerning to your heart's content. And there's also these other helpers here if you wanted to scale up the text in the Y, scale it down in the Y, and we can even scale it in the X as well, scale it up or scale it down. And there's this little thing here, which basically just moves your text up or down on that line. And there's this little thing here too, which adjusts the overall kerning of all of your letters there. So this is looking pretty good. I also recommend that you're kind of looking at things at an angle. If you want to see things straight on, go to your front view. This is where you'll really start to, you're in 2D mode and you're in 2D kerning mode as well. So this is just very handy to be able to kern your 3D text, because just because it's 3D doesn't mean you can get away from kerning something and being super official there. So let's go ahead and let's just name our text Pug Dash, so we know what that is. If we had any other text in our scene, we'd be able to know what's what. And what we're going to do at this point is Let's make this a little bit more colorful. So we're going to add some materials to this. So I have two materials, white and pink. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and just remove and hide that 3D GUI there. So I'll just go into my text and just uncheck that kerning there. So what I want to do at this point is I want a different color on the front cap of our text and another color on basically the extruded part right here. So to do this with text is actually very easy. You don't have to do polygon selections or anything like that. What we can do is let's first apply this pink material to our text. So it's going to apply that pink color to everything. And let's go and let's apply this white as well. So right now, remember how materials work. The material on the very right will be the top layer and be on top of whatever's on the left of that main material there. So the materials work and stack from right to left, so top to bottom. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to want to go in here into the caps, and let's just add a little bit of rounding here. So you can see, okay, there's some nice rounding happening there, nice little bevel, okay? And so what if we want to apply this pink or the white to just the front of this text? So what we're going to do is go over to selections, and this is basically codes for different selections that allow you to place these selection tags into, if I go into the little selection area here of my material tag, I can type in those little codes to apply materials to specific selections on this type. So you can see if I go back to the text here, you can see there's a whole bunch of selections here. So shell is basically what is the text without the caps at all. So that's basically your extrude there. Start cap and end cap. Start cap is your front cap here, the front face of your text, and the end cap is the back cap. And that's exactly what we want to highlight and use as a selection to place that white material. So you can see the code for that is C1 and C2. So if I go to this material right here, and I can either type this in, or I can even go in here and select both of these little icons here, and these will create polygon selection tags. And so what you can do at this point is just drag and drop that selection tag in there, and you'll see that C1 got loaded up in there, and you can see that the white material is now isolated to just the front cap. Now, if I wanted to also isolate it to the back cap, what I could do is I need to command click and drag to duplicate this material, because at this time you can't have multiple selections on one material. You have to create a different material if you want to also use a different selection tag. So here I can either drag and drop this C2 into this material tag, or I can just type it in. So I can type in C2, hit enter, and you'll see that voila, we now have that white material on that back cap. Okay, now if we wanted to put that white material also on this bevel rounding, what we can do is command click and drag, create another material. And just to show you that you actually don't even need to have these material tags active at all, I can go in here, and if we go to the selections, the start bevel and end bevel, which is basically the start bevel is the front bevel, so a little rounding here, and the back end bevel is this bevel right here. So if I wanted to, say, apply a white material to that front rounding or that start bevel, we would use R1, or the back bevel would be R2. So if I go into here, I can type in R1, and you can see, boom, we now have that white material on that rounding. And of course, I could change this to R2, and this will then place that white material on that rounding. So very easy to be able to apply different materials to different aspects of your MoText object here using these C1, C2, R1, R2, D2, there's no D2, but all these different selections here, and even edges and stuff like that. So again, I can just turn those off, remove those tags, and those, just because I have those letters, the C1 and the C2 there, it totally works, okay? So this is looking nice. Actually, I'm just gonna go and remove that R1. So we just have this nice pink rounded, or a pink extrude part and the white on the front and back cap. I can close out of my material manager here. And what I can do at this point is I can go and play around with more of these caps options. So we've not really dove deep with the MoText yet, and I know we're going to get to the MoGraph part of this, but this is, MoText is still MoGraphy. And what I want to do at this point is make this a little bit more bubbly looking, or rounder. And so what you can do is you could, of course, increase the size of the bevel there, but you can see once you get to a point, it gets a little janky. So let's try another thing, and that is to load up a preset. So these are all these preset bevels you can apply, and remember you have to download them first. These are all in the cloud, so if you want to have a flat angled one, I would just double click on that, and you can see this is a nice sharp bevel. Or if I want a little bit more rounded, I would go to this rounded one. And you can see that applied, and you can see this is nice and round now. And now once you activate one of these presets, what we can do is activate extrusion. And extrusion is pretty cool because you could do like a little inner extrude thing or an outer extrude, which is basically going to stretch that nice rounded bevel. And it almost gives the illusion of, this is being a little bit more like bubbly or round. So I can go back into my object tab, bring down the depth, not all the way down, but maybe 5 there, and then adjust the offset. You can see this is looking a little bit more bubbly here, which is looking good. Now, another quick way to be able to like thicken the text is to bevel on the outside. So instead of just beveling the inside, we can bevel outside, add to the thickness of the overall font, and you can see what we have here. And this is looking pretty good. We can adjust the offset here. This tension is basically, we can get really cool, see what's going on there? We can get these really cool like extrude bevels here. You can even go above the tension and have a little something like that. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the tension, the subdivisions, all this kind of stuff to get some really nice looking 3D text pretty easily here. So let me go and just make this a little bit thicker. And before we get to animating, I want to do one last thing, and that is to give a little bit of like a deformation to it. Make it look even more bubbly by having it almost like wrapped along a sphere. And so keyword wrap, I'm going to go to this deformer menu here, and I'm going to go and use this wrap deformer. Now what a wrap deformer does, if you see the little kind of UI that's going on here, it's almost like you can wrap this on like a can or something like that. So let's go and let's see what this does. I'm going to make this deformer a child of that MoText, and you can see exactly what happened. It's wrapping this text around this object here. And so if we go to the settings, and see we have the height of this, the height of the actual cylinder, the radius, and we can do two things. We can either do cylindrical wrapping or spherical. Now I think I want to do spherical wrapping here because we just maybe want this to kind of bulge out a little bit. And so this is looking pretty good. We can adjust the height and radius. We can also adjust the longitude and latitude if we wanted to. So I'm going to actually adjust the latitude here to like 35 or negative 35 and 35, and you can see what that's doing there. Boop, 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 like right there. And another thing we can do is adjust the Z-scale so we can have this pop out even more. We can adjust the tension, which is basically just, you can see what's visually happening there. It's just kind of removing some of that spherical tension. So maybe we can pull back on this and just get this like a nice little bulge going on there, and maybe increase the width here. And so this is looking pretty good. Now, the problem here is that the bulge is kind of not really working on the front of our text. And if we go into line mode, so if we go to display, garage shading lines, or NB, I'm just going to go N and then B, what you can see is we have a lot of subdivisions on the actual extruded part, but our front face, our caps of our text are just a single polygon. Okay, and so because it's a single polygon, it's not going to have accurate distortion or deformation. So what I'm going to do is I can do two things to add more geometry to the front cap. And number one is go in the object tab and remember the intermediate points. Right now it's set to adaptive. What I can do is also go to uniform and increase that subdivision there and make it evenly spaced. And another thing I can do is go to the caps, and the tessellation here is basically how is this being subdivided. Right now it's an n-gon. You can see there's this little janky thing going on right there. And that'll show up in your render. So what we need to do is add more tessellation or more subdivisions to our front caps here. And so if we go and change this from n-gon, which is basically a polygon with an unlimited amount of sides to it, which you can see here. It's a single polygon that's got a lot of sides to it. What we can do is change this to, say, a regular grid, and you can see all the jankiness kind of went away. And what I can do at this point is I can match the size of the grid, or at least try to match the size of the grid to the number of points here on the uniform. I can even go to, say, subdivided and do a little bit of both. So I have the minimum length and I have this angle here. So I can move this up and then adjust the maximum length and just try to, match these subdivisions here. And I would say that's looking good. So I'm going to go and hit N and then A to get out of my garage hitting with lines. And we got this nice rounded, bulgy pug dash text here. And while we're at it, let's just kind of angle it too. And I'll hide this deformer from view there just by hitting the top dot, changing it to red. And we got our Mo text, okay? We got our MoGraphable text. Let's go ahead and let's animate this with effectors. And so when I said we have MoGraphable text, if you go and look at all lines, words, letters here, you can see you can add effects. And effects can also be effectors, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select this Mo text object, and maybe what I wanna have happen is a little bit of like all the words all the letters kind of tumble and rotate a full 360 degrees and then comes to rest. So what I can do is let's go, and for that we're going to affect just plain old position scale rotation, mainly rotation. I'm going to go and add a plane deformer or a plane effector, and this will affect the pug dash rotation. So just rot for short. And you can see that already applied, and you can see that applied to the letters area here, the letters tab. So what this means is that you can have an effector affect all of the Mo text at once. You can have it affect lines of text at one time. You can have words be affected at one time, or you can have individual letters affected at one time. So let's just demonstrate this. If I go to my pug dash here, I got position. I don't need position. I just need rotation. And I'm going to have this go a full 360 degrees. Okay. So how we can control this animating and wiping through and rotating all of our text, we're going to use a field. So if I go to the field tab, let's go and let's grab a linear field here. And so here we got the linear field, and you can see this is affecting all of the individual letters independently. And so if I were to go though and delete that effector from the letters and go and change this to words, you would see that this effector would affect just individual words. Okay, so that's kind of the delineation of how you can use effectors to affect different groupings of either all of your text, lines of text, words, or individual letters. So most of the time I'm going to do individual letters because that looks a little bit more interesting. And so now we have this linear field. This is going to be your pug dash rotation linear field. And so this is just going to be passing through from left to right. And so I'm going to go and just move this, and I'll go to the coordinates of my linear field, hit a keyframe in the X. Let's go like 40 frames there. Pass this through, again, making sure the field passes all the way through, and let's hit play. You can see that's going through, probably going a little too fast. Let's give that 10 more frames, and I'll open up the timeline, and again, let's change these keyframes to linear keyframes so there's no ease in, ease out. If we did want to add that ease in, ease out, what we could do is just like we have in the past, we can go to the remapping of that linear field, change the contour mode to curve, and we got this really nice ease in, ease out as this is passing through. Now, of course, we can adjust the size of this linear field here to smooth it out even more, but I think that's looking pretty nice. We can always add a delay effector to smooth things out even further if we wanted to. This is looking all right so far. Now, what if I wanted to also have this kind of push out in Z space while these objects were rotating? So let's go ahead and do that. And so I'm going to actually create a whole new plane effector here. So I'm going to first select the pug dash type, go to my plane effector, and this will be pug dash, and this will just be position Z, because it's going to be coming out in Z position. And let me get a space right there. And yep, it got added to our effects stack for our MoText. And so at this point, I am going to go to the parameters and zero out, not two out, zero out the Z, and then just have this come a little bit forward. And so basically I want it to rotate and push forward just to give this a little bit oomph when this is animating a little bit here. So what I'm going to do for this plane effector is also go and add a linear field, but this linear field is going to pass through, push things forward, and I also want them to then, as the field goes and leaves the scene or leaves the text, also just brings it back to its original position. So for that, what I'm going to do, let's go and rename this pug dash position Z. And so for that, remember, we can have this remapping be like a little arc curve here, a little hill. And so the strength will be 0% on either side and 100% in the middle of this field. So let's go and change the contour mode to curve so we can actually adjust this curve. I'll move this on over, hit Command or Control and click, and add another point in there, and then just adjust these curves. So now at this point, if I have this passing through, remember, on either side of this effector, it's going to be 0% strength, but in the middle, right where the axis center is, that's where 100% of our effector strength is going to be. And so if I were going to animate this through, you can see we have this really nice push, like cascading push going right through it, okay? So at this point, I don't need to actually keyframe this field. I can go and remove this from underneath the plane effector there and just make it a child of this already animated linear field here. And so basically that is just going to follow the original linear field here. Now, something weird's happening where I'm not really seeing the positional movement here. And why that is you have to remember that you have these order of operations when you have multiple effectors. And remember, they're almost like effect stacks. Okay, so whatever is first in the list is what's executed first, and then whatever second is executed second. So right now we have rotation happening and then position happening. And so what that means is in mid-rotation, the other plane effector is coming through and moving it forward, and we're not getting the desired result. So what we can do is just flip this, have the position happen first, as you can see here, and that's going to push things forward. And let's actually make this a little bit more prominent here. Let's have this go negative like 100. And so now we're really seeing that, okay? So let's go back how it was before. So we have the rotation happening first and then the movement. And so when it's rotated, it's moving it in Z relative to the rotation. So the Z is all over the place. But if we go and we have the push of the Z forward and then the rotations applied after that, we're always going to have that position Z moving forward versus being rotated, and then whatever rotation that object's in, it's moving in the Z of the rotated state. So order of operations very important here. You can see the huge difference between just the order of operation, as you can see right there. And so this is looking really nice. Now, when this is just static, it's pretty boring. So let's add a little bit of random movement to this pug-text. So what I'm going to do is go into the effectors list, go and grab a random effector. Wow, that looks great. No, you can't even read it. So what I want to do is let's just remove a little bit of the position here. We want a little bit of position. Maybe add a little bit of rotation just to make this a little bit more interesting. And the thing I really want to adjust is this Z scale, and I want this to just grow out. So that means I need to check on absolute scale and always have positive values. So if I go negative, it's always going to be negative. If I go positive, it's always going to be positive randomness happening. So let's just call that 0.5. And we can use random effectors and apply random movement by going to the effector tab and changing the random mode to one that has animation built in. Remember, that's noise and that's turbulence. So I'll use noise for now. You can see we have this little wobbling happening here. We can adjust the scale. We can adjust the speed. And so let's maybe see what 12 looks like. And this is looking nice. You know, it's just a kind of a subtle type of thing there. We can increase the strength if we wanted to see this a little bit more pronounced. Something like that. And you can start to see a little bit of intersection going on. So what should we do then? We should go and grab a push apart effector. So let's go grab a push apart, and that is pushing things apart way too much. So I just want to get this to where things are starting to push slightly apart. And what's great about this is, remember the order stack here. Number one, we could have this random happen either before or after these plane effectors come through. And then we have the push apart. It's important the push apart happens after all of this stuff here, because if the plane effectors are passing through and rotating things and the text intersects, if we had the push apart before all that stuff happened, it would not be affecting and pushing apart those letters with all that movement applied. So you want to make sure the push apart is after everything. So it's a pushing apart the result of all these effectors affecting these objects. Okay, and so this is looking good. But again, it's a little bit too clippy. So even the push apart, you can see on that D there, it's kind of jankily moving it. And so what we can do is, let's increase this just a little bit, increase the iterations. And I guess we should name everything here to pug dash, and this is just random PSR. So pug dash PSR. So everything's named nice there. Maybe even the wrap, sure, why not? So this is just pug dash, and there we go. And so let's smooth everything out, and we'll use you nailed it, a delay effector. And so that's going to blend everything together, ease everything really nicely. So just look how smooth, silky smooth that animation is. That's looking really nice. One thing I want to show you is you can actually double up on the delay effectors, because remember you have different modes here. So one is blend, one is spring. You can't do both in the same delay effector here. So what I'm going to do is just name this pug dash, and this will be blend delay. And we can go and grab another delay effector, and this one can have the spring effect applied to it. So you can see what's going on there. And one thing I would like to do is have the blend smooth out the springiness as well. So let's just name this correctly. So pug dash spring delay. Whoop, I typed delay when delay was already there. Don't need delay. And so you can see what's going on. We have all of these things, the spring, and then it's blending and smoothing out all of those animations there. Okay, so got a little bit something like that, and I think that's looking pretty nice. Okay, so we got this working. Let's go and group all of this stuff together, and we can even go in here if we wanted to, right-click MoGraph tags, MoGraph cache that, and then we can group all of this together. So now we have all that delay animation baked in there, or cached in our animation. Let's just name this pug dash 3D text. I mean, it's in a 3D app. I don't need to designate that it's 3D, right? So let's, we got everything under there. Let's copy this over to our main pug dash scene. And let's go ahead and just move this into place, maybe scale it up, angle it a little bit there. And so we got this going on. So looking really nice, looking pretty cool. I want to show you one last thing, and that is that you can use effectors as deformers. So what does that mean? Well, I have all this really nice undulation happening with like the little rings here, the floaty hot air balloon, and that's all from a vibrate expression or vibrate tag. But what if I wanted this really nice undulation to happen to the clouds? So you saw how we added the nice undulation to the MoText. I showed you how you can add it to cloned objects as well as objects under fracture objects, but you actually don't even need to throw stuff like the clouds, if we wanted the clouds to undulate, into a fracture to have effectors be applied to it. So what we can do is, let's go and remember we want the random movement. We will go in here and grab a random effector, throw it in the same level of hierarchy as all the objects we want to affect. And in this deformer tab, we can actually change the deformation from off to object or point or polygon. And so what this means is that if you change this, see how everything jumped? Once you change a deformer and you activate its deformer abilities, basically it changes into a deformer, an animatable deformer at that. And so if we go into the random effector here, change this to noise, you can see how, let me just demonstrate if we had that off. deformation off, it's not being treated as a deformer. If we have this as on and it's affecting objects, you can see that if we had points, it's going to affect points. You can see it almost acts like a random field, almost acts as like a turbulence displace going on there. And then you can also do polygon as well. So you can affect points, polygons, and deform those things, or you could just deform the objects as a whole. Okay, so this is great. This is looking pretty nice. Adjust that speed there. The only problem is, and it's one of the big shortcomings, and it's not huge, it's not big. One of the shortcomings of a random field is it has no loop option. Okay, so that's kind of a bummer. I wish that you were able to just kind of loop this if you wanted a looping noise. You can't do it in the random effector, but there is another effector that you can load up a noise and loop the noise using a noise shader, and that is a shader effector. So a shader effector, if I place this in the same level of hierarchy here, basically allows you to load up a shader and use that shader, black and white values, to drive the effector strength, okay? So if we go into the shading tab here, it's much like the displacer where you need to load up a shader of some sort to drive the displacement. Same thing here. And in the shader options here, if I click and hold on this little button with the downward arrow, I can go and grab a noise shader here, okay? And now I just need to go in and say like, well, what am I gonna be affecting? I can affect the scale, and of course this is not gonna be affecting our objects because the deformer is set to off, so I'll change that to object and you can see those changes there. And so we'll adjust the scale, maybe give it a little bit of position movement, and let's adjust maybe just a little bit of rotation. And so at this point, we can go back in the shading tab, twirl down the shader options here, go into the noise shader, and we can change the global scale. We can adjust, and this is key, the animation speed and the loop period. So remember the loop period is based off of seconds, not frames. So this is a 24 frames per second animation. It's 5 seconds long. So if I want this to loop once every 5 seconds, I will put in 5, okay? So now you can see, let's actually crank, kind of see, very, very subtle movement there. Let's crank this up a little bit so I can up in the effector, I can up the overall strength of that, strength of the effect. Another thing that's very important with the shader effector is that by default, you know how a random field, it is automatically, if I go to this random field, go to the effector, its min and max is, it's adding and applying random values in the positive direction and the negative direction as well. So if we added random scale, it's going to be randomizing in the positive scale and the negative scale. In the shader effector, by default, does not have it's clamped at 0% in the minimum. So what we can do to enable those negative random values is just bring down the minimum to negative 100, and you can see what's going on there, and then we can bring down the overall string. So this will allow positive random values and negative random values, and so now this is basically treated as like a random effector, but with the ability to loop your noise. And so you can affect the scale here, all that kind of stuff. And so this is looking really good. And so this would be just cloud, and this is affecting, what is this affecting? Position, rotation, scale. So PSR, random PSR. So we know what that shader is doing. And you can see that right now, everything looks like it's just being affected the same. And why that is in the shading tab, our noise, the space in which it's being generated is on a texture basis. So that means that like, it's almost like you're applying the same texture to each of the clouds. And that means that each of the clouds have the same random values applied to it. So that's why everything's scaling up at the same time and scaling down at the same time. So what we can do to change this is to change the texture space from texture to 2D UV or UV 2D. And this is basically going to be like, okay, we're applying these random values of this noise almost as a 2D image on top of this 3D scene. And so now you can see the different random values being applied to each of these individual objects. And so this, and again, it's looped as well. You can adjust the animation speed to like 0.6 or 0.7 there. And you can see this is looking pretty dang nice here. So this is kind of the power of effectors, using them to animate text and just really stacking up all of these different effectors together and affecting, using different linear fields, even parenting them together so they animate together. And let's just say maybe you wanted the position Y to happen first. Just move that field before the movement of the other field, and you can see that now the push is happening. Well, actually, that's not going to show up because this is cache, so clear the cache. And so now you can see that the positional movement happens first and then the rotation. And so you can adjust these things procedurally just by simply moving the fields here, which is super, super cool. Again, visually animating using fields and effectors is the coolest thing in the world, and something I wish every single animation application had, because it's such a more visual, natural way for a visual person like an artist to animate without having to dig into animation curves and stuff like that. So you can see that basically all of the animation in the scene is it's a handful of keyframes. It's 6 keyframes handling all of these different animations in this scene for our smash hit Pug Dash game that is going to make us so much money. And to think it only took 6 keyframes. I'll see you in the next video.